I spent a month reading only things for women. Webtoons, manga, Chinese manhwa, yaoi, book. Okay, maybe not books. Books take too long. Maybe next time. But I did do all the other ones, and what I found changed the way I see media forever. You're not gonna believe what happened. Hey everybody, I'm Darnell, and if you're wondering, yes, I will leave you, just like everybody else in your life. So, I just spent the last month reading a bunch of stuff for girls.
Girls? I want to see men!
If you know what shoujo is, it's basically that. And if you don't, it's an entire genre made for girls. It's sort of like shonens, but replace tournament arcs with trying to get kissed by a character who only has eyes for the main character. And he's like sort of grumpy and annoyed by you all the time, but he still has like feelings for you. But I don't know, it's like a thing. While the shonens you probably know are like Naruto or My Hero Academia, shoujos are often more romance focused or slice of life focused as opposed to more action focused like shonens. A lot of things made by women sort of like fly under the radar when it comes to dudes. I mean, especially when it comes to dudes. So that's why I wanted to do this. I selected 5 different texts for and usually by women to go and read through them and give my honest thoughts and feelings about them, as a dude. The rule I gave myself was that I had to read at least 10 chapters of each of the texts to, get a good feeling and understanding of the characters and maybe what the author is trying to say. And also that each of the texts had to be substantially different. I'm not here to try and read, 5 different versions of a girl gets reincarnated into a villainess. That would be boring for me and for you. And, honestly speaking, I was actually kind of shocked about what happened. But that's enough suspense. Let's move on to webtoon number 1. So the first webtoon we have is called Marry My Husband. Yeah, I sure hope it does. The thing about Marry My Husband is that I think it's the perfect webtoon for me to first start with. What I mean by that is that it was like super cartoony, if that makes sense. Like, imagine all the tropes you could think of for a webtoon and like stories written for women, and then just sort of like ramp it up to like 11. Before I started reading Marry My Husband, I sort of had this idea in my head of what I thought it was gonna be. I had seen the tag of like time travel that was on it, and I had the idea that, she was gonna go back in the past, and it's like her journey to like marry her husband. And I was like, it sounds kind of boring, but whatever, I'll try it. And I was absolutely, unequivocally wrong about what happens. Okay, so let me give you a synopsis. It's a bit intense. The first scene is our main character in the hospital. She's receiving treatments for cancer, and all the other nurses in the ward are noting that every other patient has, like family members and loved ones with them, except for our main character, whose husband has never been with her even once during any of her cancer treatments. So, just to give you an idea of what this husband is like, yeah. And then to put a cherry on top, our main character basically decides that, her husband isn't there, but she wants to go see her husband. So she sneaks out of the hospital and takes a taxi to the apartment that she owns with her husband. And then upon walking into her apartment, she finds that her husband is actually there with her best friend and they're sleeping together. And then eventually her husband like attacks her. They get into like a verbal altercation. He attacks her, and then she eventually just like slams her head on a table and then just bleeds out to death. And then her fading into the light is what causes her to like go back in time. And then she wakes up and she's 10 years younger and she has all the knowledge of what's going to happen into the future. And she's going to make one thing sure, that she will get revenge on her husband and her best friend. And so this is what I mean when I say things are like ramped up to 11. If there's a character who is good, they are like super good. They are the goodest person who's ever existed. And if they're evil, they are so unabashedly, unapologetically super evil. And this is something I really like about this webtoon. The fact that, they have the story just laid out like this. Here are your good guys, here are your bad guys, here are all the tropes, go. Like, in my notes, I have the main character's best friend. I forgot to write their names. I have her labeled as just like evil. I know how that sounds, but like, she is so super evil, and like everybody knows it, but the main character is just sort of like, I don't know, she knows that her best friend is evil, even in the past. Like, we go and she's like, oh, I had always known it, but she's never acted on it for some reason. I don't know. I just love how everything is laid out right before you, and nobody wastes any time. Just like, yep, here's the plot, and like all the evil characters do like super evil faces and stuff like that. It's so just choreographed that I just kind of love it. Okay, let's get into actual plot. So the first love interest we meet is actually her manager. He's this like super tall hunk guy, because of course every hot guy has to be tall. Don't worry, short kings, I love you. But the first time we meet him, he's like this cold, only work, I'm just here to work, no fun, no play kind of guy. But the first time we actually ever get to like see him like emote really is when the main character and her boyfriend and future husband get into a fight. So they get into a really big fight. But we as the audience and the main character also don't really know why the boyfriend is yelling at her. So we're kind of just like left in the dark as he like makes these like really angry faces at her. And so the manager, like sees this, and this happens during work time. By the way, they also work together. And so the manager comes and he, puts a stop to the fight and whatever. He's like, keep your problems at home, blah blah blah. And we're like, okay, that's just manager being manager. And then after the workday ends, the manager comes up to the main character and he's like, hey, can I give you a ride home? Because like clearly her boyfriend is like waiting for her outside of the workplace. And so he's like, let me give you a ride home so you don't have to see with him or like deal with him or anything like that. And as an audience member, you're like, oh, that's very sweet of him. And she's like, yes, because she's like legitimately scared for her safety because, in the last timeline, he literally kills her. So the manager gives her a ride home. And then after giving her a ride home, he stays out of her house for like a few hours just to like keep watch on her. And like, okay, I know how that kind of sounds. If you're looking at it romantically, you're like, oh, that's so sweet. Like he's staying outside to make sure if the boyfriend does show up, nothing bad happens to the main character, or like maybe he's not even gonna let him in, that kind of thing. But also it can totally be like, why is he staying out of her house? That's kind of a little bit creepy. But it's whatever. You come into it with like a romance mindset and it's romantic. And it makes the manager just like the greatest guy ever. Even though he's got this like hard, cold shell to the main character, he's very sweet. And, that's pretty cool. I like that. And then obviously we have to crank things up to 11 because this is Marry My Husband where everything's always at an 11. And he like catches her when she's like falling down, even though he's like 30 feet away and stuff like that. It's just, I don't know, it's just really fun. And then so we're wondering as an audience, like, what does the title of the webtoon even mean? Marry My Husband. And then in chapter 3, we actually get an answer where we figure out that the main character is actually trying to get her best friend to marry her husband. Because they're both terrible people, so they deserve each other. It creates this line, which, I don't know, that to me looks crazy hard. And now we know why it's called Marry My Husband. Oh yeah, in my notes, I have written that in chapter 4, I just have like a question for the girlies. Uh, are there women watching this? I don't know, but I still have a question. In chapter 4, the main character's best friend does the like hand thing, where you compare hand sizes with the main character's boyfriend, and like it makes the main character really upset. I don't really know what it means, but if you know what it means, let me know because I have no clue. As time goes along, the main character kind of just thinks to herself, like, why do I even put up with my best friend? She's like super toxic. She wants to steal her boyfriend. Like, why? Why does she even put up with any of this? She comes to the conclusion that like I don't have to put up with any of this, and then she just like cuts her out from her life. And then she's just straight up way happier from that on. And I kind of really like this message because it's just like, yeah, she could totally just cut her off. Her best friend had so much power over her life. And then she just realizes, like, hey, she's just a person. I don't have to deal with any of this. And then she stops dealing with any of it. And she's just way better. That's kind of sick, actually. And also, there's a scene where the main character sort of like sees the ghost of her father, who had passed many years before. It's sort of alluded to that whatever her father had passed from is the cancer that will get her later on. But she sees a vision of her father, and she remembers as a child promising him that she would live a good and happy life. And so now, with her second chance, she resolves herself that, she will live a good and happy life. If not for her, then for her father's sake. And then from that point on, she starts making a lot of friends. She cuts out toxic people from her life. She starts hanging out with, men and people who love her and want to be around her. And I'm just like, man, what a wholesome story. Good for her. Just like, yeah, you deserve a good and happy life. Everybody deserves a good and happy life. Go for it. Grab it. And then one of the final notes I have near the end of the chapters is that one of the characters, Assistant Yang, her boyfriend is kind of just like this deadbeat, which kind of just reinforces the idea that, like, yeah, in this and a lot of other shoujo stuff, it's kind of like a theme where men are either God's gift to the planet or they're like the worst human beings alive. Which, like, to be fair, men do this stuff to women all the time too, so it's fine, it's whatever. I don't know, I just saw it and I was like, hey, that's kind of funny actually. Everything in this webtoon is just like kind of hilarious, but in a good and fun way, sort of like, you're in on the joke. But if I had to give Marry My Husband like an ultimate rating, I would say that, there are some fun storylines, There's a lot of fun characters, the good ones, the evil ones, and I don't know, I am just kind of invested in this story. Making it so like black and white makes it just like really easy to like a character or really dislike a character, and it kind of like gets you into the story. As the story goes along, the main character makes like a lot of new good friends who like love and support her. I think my only concern with the story is just like I don't know where it's gonna go with all the cancer stuff, and so I can think of it going like two ways. Because she's 10 years in the past, she can catch her cancer early, she can get treatment for it. So either she eradicates her cancer, or the second option, it's already too late. But we have a reverse of the first scene of the webtoon. Instead of her being alone in her hospital bed, she's surrounded by people who love and cherish her. And I think that would be pretty cool. So my final rating for Marry My Husband is it's like a lazy Sunday afternoon read. If you're looking for something light, something fun to read, I'd say yeah, go for it. It's a pretty fun time. It's not too complex. It doesn't make you like think too hard. Lots of the characters are fun and colorful. So yeah, go for it. Marry My Husband, thumbs up. The next webtoon we have up is called Dreaming Freedom. I have to say, just straight up, the art is gorgeous. Going from Marry My Husband to Dreaming Freedom is like two separate worlds. Like, I'm no artist myself, of course, but just like, man, I really love the art in Dreaming Freedom. And unfortunately, that's one of the last nice things you'll hear me say about Dreaming Freedom. If Marry My Husband was this sort of like cartoony, lighthearted, like tongue in cheek sort of webtoon, then Dreaming Freedom is sort of like the opposite, I guess. With the title Dreaming Freedom and then the picture being like this schoolgirl, I thought it was sort of going to be like, she's dreaming of freedom. Maybe she's like getting bullied. And then like through like some sort of supernatural means, she can like go into other people's dreams and like, I don't know, understand people, like make friends with them. It's not even close to that. This is kind of like a theme with all of the things I'm about to read, is that I have my idea in my head of like what I think the story is going to be, and then it just is completely not that thing. It is as far away from that thing as just like humanly possible. But okay, so what is Dreaming Freedom about that, I don't really like? So we have our main character. Apparently in elementary school, she had this friend who was just like toxic. She would like tell her like, "Oh, you shouldn't be friends with your friends. They're bad for you. You should only be friends with me. Why do you talk to this person? XYZ." And she was just like really mean and vindictive and would like love to gossip. And then eventually our main character sort of like cuts her off. And now, high school, she comes back, and it turns out that that girl that she had cut loose from before is now super popular and everybody loves her. And as an act of like revenge, that girl that she cut off is now super mean and vindictive and puts everybody against her and will do like anything in her power to just like beat her down and take away everything that she has because she feels that, she was wronged. And then, so like, where does the dreaming part come in? Well, it turns out our main character can like lucid dream, and then like okay, so like in the lucid dreams, whatever she does in the lucid dreams sort of happens in real life. Like if she like stabs somebody in a lucid dream, then they like wake up with that like stab wound. Or if she chokes somebody, or like just whatever happens in the lucid dream affects real life. And I'm just like, oh, that's kind of insane. That's like an insane superpower to have. She's like light Yagami basically, if she wanted to be. And like our main character gets like bullied so hard that she like, is vindictive. So she like, yeah, she has her lucid dreams and then she goes around like stabbing people and like choking them and then like throwing them off buildings and embarrassing them and stuff like that. And I'm just like, okay, yeah, I guess. And then, it starts happening to real people in real life and she sort of like has like a normal reaction where she's like, oh no, this isn't like a good thing. I don't like this person, but like this is a bad thing. Dreaming Freedom sort of feels like a bunch of cool ideas that aren't really executed very well. The lucid dreaming thing, as far as I got at least, didn't really go anywhere. I kind of hope it goes somewhere as the story goes along, but it didn't really go anywhere. There's also this really weird way that the girls in the school bully. So there's this like scene where they start talking about like how much gigabytes of data they have on their data plans for their cell phones, and I'm just like, this isn't how like high school girls talk. I don't think. I don't know. Maybe I'm just like out of touch or something. But our main character enters the scene, and then while they're talking about this, they go up to her and they're like, "Oh, how many gigabytes of data do you have on your phone plan?" And she's like super poor and whatever, so she's she has like zero. And then the bullying that they do is they make her make a hotspot for them so that they can like suck away all the little bits of data that she has on her cell phone plan, so that she just doesn't have data on her phone, I guess. It's really weird. It's cool, I guess, and it's like inventive, but I don't really get why it's there. And the like dreaming thing, yeah, it does come up, but the main character, she's sort of like wishy-washy on like whether she should use it or not. By the time we get introduced to this like supernatural being that sort of like allows the lucid dreaming to affect the real world, she has basically decided that she doesn't want to lucid dream anymore, and that she has like real friends. She has a guy that she likes, and that her life is going pretty well. And like you and I both know it's not gonna last. By the time she tells the supernatural being that like, hey, I'm not gonna use these power for evil, bye. Immediately after, we see that these new friends that she has made that like help her out are actually like kind of really mean and like sort of like using her in a way and like love to gossip and it's like a whole thing. But the guy that she likes, he's just kind of cool. Like he's actually my favorite part of this story. He's just like a breath of fresh air. One of the things that I will compliment Dreaming Freedom on is that it really feels like suffocating. Like our main character sort of has like no escape from the world that she lives in. So when the dreaming stuff happens, it kind of really does feel like an escape. And so the main love interest, when he shows up, he's like this really extroverted, really like, he says what's on his mind and he talks a lot and he uses like funny emojis and stuff like that. And I'm just like, yeah, I love this guy. All the people in her school are like super two-faced. They want to use each other to like get up on top of each other on the social hierarchy and whatever. And then we get introduced to this guy and he's just like, yeah, I'm really geeky and nerdy and also really hot. But he's like super unashamed about how geeky and nerdy he is. So it's kind of like, it's fun. He's a fun character. Also, this is just like a little nitpick that happens. After she meets the like supernatural lucid dreaming guy, she goes online and she looks up who this guy is, and apparently he's like some sort of like super secret urban legend. And it says in the webtoon the fact that his existence has been proven false. How do you prove an urban legend false? Especially one that's based on lucid dreaming. How on earth can you prove false that this guy who shows up in lucid dreams exists? I don't get how that works. But whatever. But yeah, honestly, Dreaming Freedom sort of just feels like a bunch of neat ideas that haven't really had their time to breathe. And I feel like that's part of my fault because I haven't gone far enough into this story to allow the ideas to maybe breathe. I'll maybe revisit this one at a later point, but for right now, I just gotta say, I don't really like it. There are some cool things, like I like the main love interest. I like how evil the villain is. She's just like psychopathically obsessed with the main character, unabashedly evil too. She feels like a character from Marry My Husband. Just like straight up. This is just me saying I really like Marry My Husband again, I guess. So my final rating for Dreaming Freedom is, I guess it needs more time in the oven. That's what my rating would be. I'll probably revisit this at some point if I'm like super curious about if the story gets better. But for right now, I'm not too distraught about whether or not I like this. The next manga is Sekaiichi Hatsukoi. Hi, hello. Welcome to the Yaoi Zone. Yes, Sekaiichi Hatsukoi is a yaoi. So, first of all, I want to say thank you to my friend Mel for recommending this to me. If you're wondering, yes, I did bug a bunch of women in my life to make this video. Thanks. The plot of Sekaiichi Hatsukoi is that the main character is a manga editor, and he's assigned to work at the shoujo department of the manga company that he works at. But it turns out the manager of the shoujo department is actually his first love from high school, and also the love that broke his heart. After that, he's had a lot of trouble loving other people, and because of this, hijinks ensue. So, my first note about Sekaiichi Hatsukoi that I have written down is that, wow, there is so much sexual assault, uh, in this manga. Like, dear God, there is so much sexual assault. Okay, so, trigger warning, yaoi. If you're somebody who reads yaoi or knows about yaoi, then I don't think I need to say anything else. If you're someone who doesn't know about yaoi, then here on the screen will be a bunch of trigger warnings, because I think I have to explain how yaoi works. So the thing you need to understand about yaoi is that it's gonna come with a lot of warnings. And that's because yaoi as a genre is sort of like pornography or hentai with regards to things like consent. It works on the same rules as they do. But there's something weird that we need to understand. Yaoi is mostly enjoyed by women, and there's a specific reason for that. And I want to preface what I'm about to say with the fact that this was taught to me by the same person who recommended this manga. So once again, I want to say thank you to my friend Mel for not only giving me a good manga to read, but also, explaining it to me so that I could in turn explain it to you. So what you need to understand is that yaoi exists as a safe space for women because of the fact that there are no women involved. Unlike in the texts I've read before, where the main character are women, many of the problems are actually solved by the fact that, maybe the woman is pretty, or, trying to beautify them, or some other way of doing it. But usually, problems are solved through the objectification of women, where women are the main target. And so, what Yaoi does is allows you to have the story you want, but there's no ugly woman who becomes pretty woman, or abused woman who becomes not abused woman. It's all about men, and allows you to have romances and stories where women as a group aren't at all affected. So it also allows you to have stories where maybe the power dynamics are a little bit weird. And if the main character was a woman, you'd be like, oh, this is weird and fucked up. But because there's a man, you're like, okay, this is fine. You don't have to think about any of the weird power implications of you being a woman. You don't have to do any like deep critical thinking about your place as a woman in a patriarchal society. You can just focus on all the sexy stuff without, any critical thinking. It also gives power to women because it allows them to objectify men. You've probably seen pictures of like yaoi hands or like very interestingly shaped yaoi men. Yaoi as a space allows women to be the one doing the objectification for once. Another thing yaoi does is it's like repellent to straight men. I mean, I would know, I'm a straight man, and basically no man I know would talk about yaoi or even like mention the fact that they read it. So it creates a space for women where they get to keep all the straight men out, and it's just, them and the gays, I guess. Because if you've ever talked to any woman ever, they'd tell you, yeah, I'd like less straight men in my life telling me how to think and feel about things. Another thing about yaoi is that it has a very contentious relationship in Japan, because Japan isn't very cool with gay people. So shows like Yuri on Ice had to fight not to be labeled as yaoi or BL because of a kiss that happens for 3 seconds and is completely censored. And the reason that's important is because things that are labeled as yaoi or BL get an automatic mature rating, which means, sales go immediately downwards, etc., etc. And often with yaoi and BL is that the Japanese government would come in and, tell people how to write gay relationships because, they wanted gay relationships to not look good. So they would often have to be portrayed as like bad and toxic to even appear whatsoever because, they don't want people to think gay relationships are good. So to summarize it basically, yaoi is a female power fantasy that keeps real straight men out of it. It also allows the women reading it to have the power without taking away from them through objectification, and also, it gets you horned up, of course. Plus, it has the benefit of being for the gays as well. It's basically like the perfect catch-all. So if you've ever wondered, why do women love yaoi so much? Well, now you know. The thing about yaoi is it's sort of like a if you know, you know. Going from dreaming freedom to Sekaiichi Hatsukoi was like night and day. I was not expecting what happens like at all. I was nowhere near prepared. And if you go in unprepared, you are straight up just gonna have a bad time, especially as like a dude who has no knowledge of yaoi. Just so now that we understand what yaoi is, how do I feel about Sekaiichi Hatsukoi? I kind of still don't really like it that much. Here's the thing about Sekaiichi Hatsukoi. It's enjoyable, once you get into like the smut mood. It's fun. I don't know. I don't like the main romance between the main character Onodera and his love interest. It just, I don't know. It just doesn't get me for some reason. But the thing about Sekaiichi Hatsukoi is that there's not just one romance. There's actually a bunch of them. Sekaiichi Hatsukoi is separated into like a bunch of sections of romances. It's sort of like a choose your own adventure on like the flavor of romance that you want. And within the 10 chapters that I read, by the way, Sekaiichi Hatsukoi is split into like 1.1, 1.2, 1.3. It was so much. But split into the 10 chapters that I read, there were two separate romances. There was the main one with Onodera, and then there was one with a character named Kisa. The romance between Kisa and his love interest Yukina, I don't know, I just find it more, I don't know. So you already know the dynamic between Onodera and his love interest. They were past lovers, and then now he works under him. For Kisa and his love interest Yukina, the way it works is that Kisa considers himself middle aged. He's 30, but he like says he's like, oh, I'm so old. I've lived my life and blah blah blah. And I'm like, come on, you're like 30. You're younger than Germa is.
Why didn't anyone tell me that Germa's 47? He's gonna die soon.
But either way, he's like, oh, I'm old, I'm burned out, I've loved and lost and blah blah blah. But he's never like his whole thing is that he's never like truly loved. He's only been in relationships where the thing was like sex. It was purely carnal. And then when he sees Yukina, it's like love at first sight, and he doesn't really understand how to deal with these feelings. Yukina is a college student who's a few years younger than him, and through their relationship, Kisa sort of learns how to, cope with these feelings that he's never had before, and sort of, live a life that he never knew that was even possible. And I don't know, I just find it really cute. And I just like it. It's a fun relationship, it's a fun dynamic, and I like it. Not so much as the Onodera stuff. Even with the Kisa stuff, by the way, I should mention there is still a lot of sexual assault, but it's a little bit more consensual. Even though, we both know what yaoi is, so it doesn't really entirely matter. But, if that's what you're looking for, consent in yaoi, it's sort of there. Another thing with how Sekaiichi Hatsukoi works is that, like, it's just so normal. When normal romantic things happen, it feels, more impactful. Because all we've had so far is, like, so, when somebody buys another person flowers, you're like, oh my goodness, I wasn't expecting that. I was expecting them to just fuck, I guess. I was like, no, that's kind of cool. Also, the bookstore that Yukina works at is called Marimo Books, One Piece reference. Anyways, my overall rating for Sekaiichi Hatsukoi is, it's cute. And if you're in the mood for smut, go for it. It's got its moments, and, it's sort of like a choose your own adventure. There's tons of couples here, so just choose what you like. So my final rating for Sekaiichi Hatsukoi is horny. Stupid.
I don't want that one. I don't want this one.
I know. That's why I'm saying.
I don't want this one.
I know. I wouldn't.
Please spare me.
Hello and welcome back to the Yaoi Zone. Yes, this is another Yaoi. But surprise, surprise, number 4 is a manhwa, or a Chinese webtoon, or Chinese manga. It's Chinese. It is a Chinese manhwa called To Be or Not To Be. I would say this one is the most important, but it's not really my favorite. My favorite's number 5, by the way. And the plot is, the main character is a CEO of like a gigantic company. He calls himself like a treacherous CEO. I'm not really sure what he means by that. I think he means like evil, but like he's not really evil. I don't know. I think I'll get to that later on. But so we have this treacherous CEO who's like the CEO of like this big multinational company. He's like a young guy, and he's also diagnosed with cancer, something we've seen previously. And finally, he's never once found love in his life. So we have rich CEO, diagnosed with cancer, and has never ever felt love. One day while chilling, he's reading like a novel that he really likes, and he falls asleep and never wakes back up. But instead, he wakes up as a villain, mook, mob, little nobody villain in the novel that he really likes. And so it's his job to like survive because, he doesn't want to get just like murdered immediately. That and keep on plot as much as possible because, if the novel doesn't keep on plot, besides the stuff with him, then the world is going to be destroyed by some, like, overwhelming evil force. So why do I say that this manhwa is important? Well, number 1, I really like the main character. Unlike a lot of the other main characters of the other ones I've read, they feel more like, like self-insert characters, where, you have to see yourself in the character. They're sort of, like, blank, with, a little bit, enough of a personality, but they're usually, they're shy people, and it's usually the other person who's the aggressor, pushing the romance onto the main character. But the main character of To Be or Not To Be is he really shows off his personality. He really is just like a character. He has things that he wants to get done, and he does them. He's not passive, he's very active, and I really like that about him. Maybe it's the fact that I've had so many passive main characters so far that I really like this active main character, but it is what it is, I guess. A thing I thought I was gonna dislike is, the fact that he's a treacherous CEO, but like when we see him do like CEO stuff, and we have like flashbacks to him in the past and stuff like that, he's just like a nice guy. He's just like a normal, nice guy. He thinks in his head that he's like a super evil, treacherous CEO, but in reality, this is just like his image of what an evil CEO is like. I don't even know. I don't even know what his image of an evil CEO is, because he like gives his workers like overtime pay, and he like makes sure that they're like well taken care of. And like if they make like a gigantic mistake, like one of the character's servants like starts bullying the main love interest by accident because she misunderstands what his words are. He just like forgives her, and she gets to keep her job and stuff like that. If this was like a different book, I would have definitely seen bullying the main character's love interest, like, oh, I'm gonna kill you now, that kind of stuff. But no, he's just like a normal nice guy. I don't understand why he calls himself a treacherous CEO, but to each their own, I suppose. Another thing I really like is they say that the main character has never like fallen in love, which, is easy enough to say. At the end of the first few chapters, we actually get to see glimpses into his love life, and I really like it. Number one, because this is a yaoi, and we get to see, like, men interacting with the main character in, like, a love interest sort of way. But we also get to see why the main character has never fallen in love. And we get to see, like, these little glimpses into his past, and he's just, like, he just keeps fumbling the bag. These people just keep coming to him, and, they're interested in him, and he just, like, doesn't really understand what's going on. And then we also get to see that in the manhwa as it continues on, because, the main love interest is the main character of the novel that he was reading. And the main character of that novel just keeps coming on to the main character, and he keeps coming on to him, keeps coming on to him, and he just doesn't get it. He just doesn't get it. And so we get to see, like, he didn't get it in the past, he still doesn't get it in the future. But we understand why he is the way he is. And another thing we learn is that the main character actually grew up poor. And how he became the person that he is. He grew up poor, his mother died, and then he got to take over his father's company, etc., etc. They're cut into, like, these little small portions where we get to see into his past, and I'm just like, I like the fact that we get to see these things. Because, a lot of stories will just, like, say, like, oh, zero love experience, and then, we just have to keep going along with that. But this one, they say zero love experience, and then we get to see the main character, going on dates and stuff like that, and just, like, failing at it. I don't know, I just really like the, whole show, don't tell. I guess more show and tell, but you know what I mean. I just really like it. So the main reason I said that this manhwa is important is because I think it helped me understand why people like yaoi. So something you may have noticed so far is that a lot of the characters look very androgynous. Can't really tell what their gender is. This actually got to me at a point because I just kind of stopped caring about what the people's genders were and just kind of got invested into the romances. Like, the main character has his romance, but a lot of the side characters also have romances, and I got really into them at some point. And, I was thinking to myself, like, oh, what are the genders of these people? And then I kind of thought, like, I can't tell. I'd have to go back and find where somebody, like, says a pronoun, and then, like, assign that in my head. And I was just like, I don't care. I don't care what gender these people are. I just like their romances. They're nice and sweet. And I was like, wow, that's actually really cool. And then I just applied that to everything that happens, and I was just like, oh my god, I'm just, like, super interested in all of these romances, regardless of gender. And I just thought, like, that's really cool. It's, like, super gender abolitionist. I don't really know if that was the point, but I don't know, I found it was really cool. Another thing we find is that the main character tells us that a lot of the marriages and, like, romances in the original novel are based on, like, political reasons. They're mostly, like, political relationships and political marriages. And so the relationships that happen in the actual manhwa, because the main character has screwed with the plot so much, a lot of the, like, political stuff collapses on itself, and people are just, like, straight up falling in love with each other. And I think that's really cute. The romances are done very nicely. They're all, very romantic, and they have the romantic gestures and all that kind of stuff. Romance gets a thumbs up. But I also like the fact that because the romances, go against the established plot, that means they're probably actually in love. And it makes the romances, feel a little bit more real. And I'm just like, that is also very cool. A lot of the stuff in this manhwa is just very, very cool. I don't know how else to put it. You're not here to hear me gush about To Be or Not to Be. You're here for a review. So, okay, the romances are good. I really like them. They're very well done and very cute. The gender stuff is also very cool. This manhwa is very queer and unapologetically queer. Even though the main character is in a gay relationship with another man, there are also relationships where it's just girl and girl, or boy and boy, or, like I said, the gender doesn't really matter. And that's just kind of cool. Okay, so my final reading for To Be or Not to Be is definitely, if you're in the mood, I'd say give it a read. It's honestly uplifting. Enlightening? Is that the right word? But my final verdict is, gender abolition, I guess.
Wait a minute. There's something bothering me about this place. I know! This lesbian bar doesn't have a fire exit! Enjoy your death trap, ladies!
What was her problem?
And finally, last but not least, our final manga is My Yakuza Fiance. By the way, if you haven't played any of the Yakuza games, play them. Like, actually just play them. But nevertheless, the plot of My Yakuza Fiance is our main character is the granddaughter of a rural Yakuza family. Quite powerful one, but because they are rural, they don't have as much pull in the urban areas. And so, she's going to Tokyo, I believe it's Tokyo, for a proposed arranged marriage with grandson of another Yakuza family, another powerful Yakuza family, in order to, like, merge them and become, like, one big powerhouse in Japan or whatever. I don't know how Yakuza works. You'd think I know that after playing the Yakuza games. I'm mostly just there for Kiryu to beat dudes up. But ultimately, the choice of whether or not she marries this guy is up to her. Her grandfather lets her know, like, hey, stay there for a year, see if you like him. If you don't, come back, that's totally okay. I knew this guy from time, but it's totally okay if you don't want to get married to him. So she's just going there for a year, she's transferring schools and all of that, and seeing if she likes the guy to see if she wants to get married to him. And so we get to meet the grandson, and he's got like a cheery face, he's got like a great disposition, whatever. He's buff, he's nice, every girl in the school loves him. He's just like a classic dude. But then we learned that he's a little bit of a dark side to him. He's a little bit weird, a little bit crazy. The first time we get to see this side of him, I believe, is in either the first or second chapter. We see him brutalize a gang of gangsters, just nearly beat them half to death. And after that, he expresses to the main character how he doesn't really want to do this anymore. He doesn't want to put on the fake act anymore, and he's sort of done with the main character. He's had enough fun with her as is. He then tells her that the only use she would have to him is as a prostitute who gives him money, because to him, and to the Yakuza, her as a person would have no other real-world worth. So yeah, we learned that he's basically like a psychopath, and then after he tells her that, he goes and sleeps with a bunch of women, just to, hammer in the fact that he does not like our main character. This isn't the guy who, like, secretly has a crush on the main character or anything like that. Like, he doesn't like her. Our main character goes and she gets bullied by the other girls at school. Our main character is at her lowest point possible. She finds out that the guy she's supposed to get married to is just like a psychopath who sees her as less than garbage. The girls at school are being mean to her, so she doesn't even have friends at all. Basically, everything just sucks for her. And this is where I thought I was going to stop with this review. I thought I was just going to end with it. I thought I figured out what this manga was going to be already. I was so entirely wrong. I think if there's like a theme to this video, it's like me having the image of what I'm about to read in my head, just being completely wrong about absolutely everything. I thought that this was going to be about her trying to like win over the psychopath guy and, just like trying to be like, oh, look, he's actually got a sweet side to him, like one of those kind of things where it like sort of like glorifies the psychopath guy or whatever, and it's her like trying to like cozy up to him, that kind of thing. It is absolutely not close to that at all. The first scene we see in the next chapter is the main character just like putting a package down on the love interest's desk. She has sold one of her livers to give the love interest a bunch of money. And then she goes and she tells off the girls who are bullying her just by like screaming at them and threatening them, because our main character, who I thought was, just like a normal person, like just like a normal girl, is not that. She's not like your average normal pushover main character girl. Absolutely not. She is the granddaughter of a Yakuza, and she means business. Just like the love interest, she's a little bit weird. She's a little different. She's a little bit, I'm the Joker, baby. But yeah, so we learned that the main character's love interest is like a psychopath, and our main character isn't as stable as well. Our main character has sort of been like putting on like a little bit of an act to act normal, I suppose would be the term. And now that she's seen how her supposed husband is, she just kind of doesn't care anymore. And so she just lives true to herself. And her real self is honestly really cool, and I really, really like her. Like the last main character, she's super active. She's not passive whatsoever. She takes an active role in her life and the things around her. First order of business, she maintains, and I believe her, that she does not like the love interest. I'm gonna keep calling him love interest, because, that's how it seems the way things are going. She basically proves that she has, like, absolutely zero interest in him, because he tells her that he's been sleeping with other women, and it is literally no sweat off of her back. She just does not care. She does not care for him, or his love, or any of the political stuff. The only reason that she stays where she is to prove that she's not a little bitch, basically. And I was like, oh my god, that's really cool. She's super cool. Because the love interest is like a psychopath, and she's also a little bit weird, I just really like the dynamic between these two characters. He'll try and be like, oh, look at how crazy I am. Look at how weird I am. Look how wacky I am. And she'll just be like, I don't care. I literally don't care. I have things to do. I have things to go do. Please leave me alone. And he'll like try and like prove himself and stuff like that. They get captured by a bunch of real Yakuza at one point, and I'm just like, oh, okay, he's gonna show off how like big and muscly he is. He takes off his shirt and oh my god, he's got the tiger tattoo. And he starts dealing with these Yakuza, and I'm just like, oh no, what's the main character gonna do? And she just starts fucking throwing hands. She just goes crazy with it. She's absolutely not a damsel in distress. She just fucking 1, 2, 1, 2. She just goes for it. I'm just like, oh my god. And she's just like, I'm not gonna stand around here and just not fight while these people are just like threatening my life. I'm just like, yeah, go for it. She's demolishing these guys too. And even the love interest is like, whoa, I was not expecting this. Because like, yeah, she's her own person and she really shows it. I'm like, oh my god, this is so cool. I really like this one. At first, I wasn't even sure that this was a shoujo because it just like straight up deconstructs all of the tropes that I've learned so far. You know, the main character gets bullied by a bunch of girls. Well, she just fucking deals with it. The main character has to get saved by the love interest? No, she just starts fighting on her own. Even at one point, the main character's childhood friend comes. He has the dragon tattoo, so, you know, there's gonna be beef there. Another Yakuza reference. I can't believe the Yakuza are referencing the hit video game Yakuza. That's crazy. Nevertheless, her male childhood friend shows up, and he clearly has a thing for the main character. And the love interest, at this point, he sees that the main character went Joker mode, and all of a sudden, just like super in love with her. Because he's like, oh, she's weird just like I am, oh my god. So the love interest, you know, he starts to get jealous. He starts to like, he gets sus of the main character's childhood friend. And then eventually, the love interest kind of doesn't like that. He kind of doesn't like how much time that he's spending around her and how much things they do together. He doesn't like that. So, while the main character is asleep, he starts, you know, egging him on. He starts just like talking about him and being like, oh, I'm gonna marry the main character. And, you know, her childhood friend is like, no, you're not. You're like a terrible guy. Why do you even like her? And, you know, the love interest is like, you know, doesn't matter. I want her, so she'll be mine. And then eventually the main character comes outside and they go back and forth, you know, a little bit of gags and whatever. And it feels like these two characters are gonna fight. You know, the classic guys fighting over a girl thing. And eventually the love interest is like, well, it doesn't matter anyways because she's gonna fall in love with me and not some outback country swine like you. The childhood friend at that point, he got angry. And he's just like, you, and immediately main character cuts him off. And she's like, hey, like, that's my fucking family. You don't talk about my family like that. I don't give a shit who you are. You don't talk about the people I love like that. She just sets the law down. And I was just like, oh my god. I just like was not expecting that. Because, I don't know, even with how, you know, active the last main character was, at no point does anybody try and, like, sabotage the romance aspect of it. Supposedly, this guy is the love interest, and she's actively just being like, hey, shut the fuck up. You don't talk to people like that. You know, love interest is just, like, taken aback. He's just like, whoa, I was not expecting that. And I really like that about her. Regardless of, you know, what genre this is, or what is happening, the fact that this is a shoujo, a romance, the main character just, like, she's living true to herself, and I really like that fact. Both the story and all of the characters just have me really, really interested. You know, even with the main character's grandfather, Tokyo grandfather, the protagonist, her love interest, her childhood friend, all of the characters are all, like, their own breed of interesting. So I gotta say, my final verdict for my Yakuza Fiance is just straight up must read. I love this manga. And I'm kind of sad that all of the translations have slowed down because, oh my god, I am so interested in what's going to happen next. If you're wondering about which of the texts that I've read past the 10 chapters, the answer is most of them, except for Dreaming Freedom. I don't know. I'm probably going to get back to it at some point, but it just couldn't hold my interest for long enough. But the ones I've continued the longest are number 4 and number 5. To Be or Not to Be and My Yakuza Fiance. I don't know. They just hold my interest much more than everything else in here. But ultimately, I like most of the stuff I read here. It was honestly very surprising. And I was surprised to find things about myself out while reading them. That, by the way, I'm still a cishet dude. Just, you know, throwing that out there. I hope you enjoyed this video and I hope you learned something, because I certainly did. And I hope this video helps illustrate that just because media may not be designed for us, whether it's for women or for queer people, doesn't mean it can't add value to our lives. Just like how you can add value to my life by subscribing. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next video.